the Diocese of Lafayette in Indiana. The story of the faith in this region began with the labors of missionaries, was sustained and nurtured by holy bishops, priests, and nuns, and carries on today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Timothy Doherty.
The question is Jesus Christ still relevant for us? You gain your humanity by your study of Christ and by your keeping company with him.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. "63 miles northwest of Indianapolis and 105 miles southeast of Chicago, in the heart of Tippecanoe County, is the city of Lafayette, sea city of the Diocese of Lafayette in Indiana.
Lafayette is the county seat of Tippecanoe County, Indiana. The Native Americans were really the first to discover the beauty of what is known as the Wabash Valley, especially the Miami tribe. The town of Lafayette was not founded until about 1825, taking its name from the French general, the Marquis de Lafayette, who was very instrumental in helping George Washington during the Revolutionary War.
In the 1840s, the Wabash and Erie Canal arrives, and then the 1850s, the railroad comes. So Lafayette starts to really blossom into this extraordinary manufacturing, merchandising, transportation center, along with being a shipping center as well. In August of 1859, Lafayette becomes the first place where the U.S. Postal Service does its first airmail delivery.
The oldest parish in what is now the diocese is St. Mary's in Lafayette, which now serves as the cathedral parish. It was established in 1843 by Irish immigrants. They erected a small chapel that would serve them for 20 years until they were able to complete a permanent church in 1866. Originally, all of Indiana fell under the Diocese of Vincennes, the first diocese in the state, established in 1834, back when the region was heavily influenced by French missionary activity and the work of French religious orders, including the Fathers of the Holy Cross, who later went on to establish the University of Notre Dame, and the Sisters of Providence, established by Mother Theodore Guerin, who became a saint in 2006.
Saint Mother Theodore was a woman who had real courage, determination, and compassion. She was born in France and had a really challenging life at a very young age. She had this compelling desire to lead a life of prayer. Eventually, at the age of 18, her mother allows her to go, and she joins a local women's religious community. She's sent to various parishes where she teaches, she cares for the sick and the poor. She even studies medicine at one point on her own. Doesn't have a medical degree, but just in order to enhance her skills as a practitioner. Eventually, the Bishop of Vincennes, Indiana, makes a request for some sisters to come to America. So she and about 5 other sisters come along with some Catholic immigrants, landing in New York, but eventually making their way to this area of Indiana.
When she and her sisters arrive in what is now St. Mary of the Woods, there's no village there. There were no houses. But despite these obstacles, she opens a girls' academy in less than a year, and she continues forward, establishing schools throughout Indiana and eastern Illinois. As a congregation of the Sisters of Providence, the sisters decide that they're going to add their location to their name. So they became known as the Sisters of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods.
Mother Theodore and the Bishop of Vincennes, Bishop de la Alanière, both had very strong personalities. Both were interested in the well-being of the community, so they would frequently clash with one another. The bishop really thought that he had total control over the congregation of women. Mother Theodore understood canonically that he did, yet she felt, and rightly so, that he was overstepping his bounds. Eventually, word gets to Rome, and the Pope, the Holy Father, accepts the bishop's resignation. And the sisters are then able to continue the work that they so desired deeply to do, just ministering and educating the poor.
During the 1910s and 1920s, Catholics in the diocese were confronted by a new wave of nativism and anti-Catholic sentiment, much of it incited by the resurgence of the Klan. In 1923, Kokomo was home to one of the largest Klan gatherings in the nation's history, with more than 200,000 reported gathering. As part of the Klan's activity in Kokomo, they worked to raise money to establish a county hospital, driven by a desire to drive the Catholic hospital out of business. Ironically, the Catholic sisters who operated St. Joseph's Hospital later acquired the county hospital when it encountered financial difficulties. And their ability to acquire the property was made possible through the benefaction of a member of the Klan himself, who was once turned away from the county hospital because he appeared to be penniless. The Catholic sisters, though, welcomed him in and took care of him regardless of his ability to pay. He later repaid that debt, and the sisters liked to boast that theirs was the only Catholic hospital in the country built by the Klan.
The Diocese of Lafayette in Indiana was established by Pope Pius XII on October 21st, 1944. It was taken from territory of the Diocese of Fort Wayne. The first bishop of the diocese was John Bennett, who was a strong advocate for Catholic education. In addition to overseeing the expansion of elementary and secondary education in the diocese, he also worked hard to establish a Catholic chapel at Purdue University to serve Catholic students there. He also worked to acquire property throughout the diocese in anticipation for future growth.
The second bishop of the diocese was John Carberry, a native of Brooklyn and recognized expert in canon law. During his time in Lafayette, he attended the opening sessions of the Second Vatican Council, where he was influential in shaping the debates on religious liberty and ecumenism. An able administrator, he was appointed Bishop of Columbus and then went on to become the Cardinal Archbishop of St. Louis.
The Diocese of Lafayette comprises both the northern suburbs of Indianapolis as well as a large part of rural Indiana. In recent decades, the Church has had to spend a great deal of time considering how to balance the needs of these two distinct communities.
We're very sparse in some places and we're very dense in other places. How do we serve across this kind of a spectrum? These different cultures have different customs, and today we have a tremendous Hispanic population here from many different countries that need to be served, and we're forever praying to find the best ways to do that and to invite people into that ministry to lift up that part of our population which is newer here, but for whom faith and culture mean a lot. You know, how can we support them?
The spiritual center and the mother church of the diocese is the Cathedral of St. Mary of the Immaculate Conception. The cathedral has roots which predate the American Civil War. The original parish was the Church of St. Martha and Mary, a small brick building which housed the liturgies of the small Catholic community in the early days of Lafayette. The current church building was begun in 1860, but it wasn't completed until 1866.
It's basically the same church as it was. It's been redone a few times, the latest in the year 2000, and I think they did a very beautiful job here. And one of the men who ran that is still with us, and he said he chaired 400 meetings to get this to where it is. So he's very proud of this, and it is a very beautiful place.
The design of St. Mary's Cathedral is modeled after the Gothic European cathedrals, and you can see that in the ribbed groin vaults that line the nave.
We embody our relationship in Mary in a physical way in an old church like this, because I'm told by art historians that the ribs in the ceiling here represent Mary's ribs. So the building itself we can imagine as being inside the care of Mary.
The cathedral was completed in 1866. A bell tower, however, was added in 1898. And beautiful frescoes and stained glass depicting the life of Christ and the saints line the nave. The cathedral has gone through relatively few renovations over the course of its 150-year history, and the soaring nave is divided into 3 sections by 2 rows of columns. The focal point of the church is a statue of the risen Christ who raises his arms up, showing his wounds. He's placed in front of a large cross, and his body is surrounded by a full body halo. And there's beautiful blue ceiling throughout the church, but the blue ceiling is really accentuated in the sanctuary by gold geometric and floret designs that draw your attention to this focal figure of Christ. Beneath the figure of Christ, the apostles gaze up at him in wonder and amazement.
One of the first parishioners and one of the first pastors were supposedly buried in the basement here, and when they went to put air conditioning in the church, they had to tunnel through what was not a basement at all, and found these graves. I think it was Father Hamilton was the first pastor. I do not intend to be buried in my cathedral, by the way. Somebody asked me that question, and I haven't decided where yet, but I hope I don't have to think about that for a while. When people come from around the diocese for the Chrism Mass, I very often will explain to them, usually ahead of time, that it's not called the cathedral because of a cathedral ceiling. It's called a cathedral because the cathedra, the bishop's chair, is the symbol of his authority and teaching office. It can be in different parts of a sanctuary. It just happens to be up in the middle here at this church. And the coat of arms on it is divided between the coat of arms of the diocese and my personal coat of arms, which if I recall, part of it signifies an open book, the scripture, the Sacred Heart of Jesus being probably my main devotion. There's just something that's very appealing to that. And then there's a symbol for Mary, the fleur-de-lis is also there in that coat of arms.
The bishop's chair, or cathedra, inside St. Mary's Cathedral represents Bishop Timothy Doherty's role as the Apostle of Lafayette.
I'm the oldest of 7 children, and Mom is still living up in Rockford, where I'm from. I went to Catholic schools in Illinois, then Cleveland, Ohio, and then back in the Chicago suburbs. I always felt I was treated well by the teachers, whether they were sisters or lay people. I think part of my respect for the church, my door into Christ, my door into church life, was through people who had a respect for me and a respect for intellectual pursuits and curiosity. So my vocation developed, I think, partly because of good models. Simply a love of God who was reflected in so many beautiful things that the church had or the church did. But as I got older, I continued to be fascinated with God and my place in this creation, and had, I won't call it mystical, but just a wonderful appreciation for kind of the miracle of life. And the idea of a real religious vocation settled in when I was a little more mature. I went off to major seminary where the serious discernment happened. Spiritual directors will tell you different things to examine. You know, do you feel a strong pull? Do you see anything blocking you? Are there any obstacles? Are there signals saying that you shouldn't be a priest? And I didn't have any blocking signals. I went to college at St. Ambrose College in Davenport, Iowa. Today it's St. Ambrose University. And even though it was only 1,200 students at the time, it was very politically aware and active. It was a terribly tumultuous time in the country. And my studies were general liberal arts to start, and then majored in psychology.
Timothy Doherty was ordained to the priesthood on June 26, 1976.
I was originally ordained to be a priest of the Rockford, Illinois Diocese, and was there for 34 years before I came here. So I've done a lot of different things in my priesthood, from being parish priest to high school teacher, vice principal, ethicist, grad student for a while, so my sympathies to everyone who has to do that. It's a lot of work. And I'm currently the chair of the Committee for the Protection of Children and Young People for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops.
On May 12, 2010, Doherty was appointed the 6th Bishop of Lafayette in Indiana by Pope Benedict XVI.
This is a typical pastor story. The nuncio called me to be a bishop just after I had completed a 53-year-old fireman's funeral. He had just gotten suddenly sick and died. And the funeral and the lunch that followed, there were 16 different fire departments there, each with a truck or emergency wagon. And I was exhausted at the end of this. I had another tragic funeral the next day, but I was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, sitting in my office. The phone rang, and my secretary was in the other room, on her chair, rolls into the doorway, and she says, "Archbishop Sambi on the phone for you?" And I just looked at her and I said, "Please close the door," because I knew he wasn't calling me to ask about the Chicago Cubs, my favorite. I knew before I picked up the receiver that my life would never be the same whether I said yes or no. I didn't have the words at the time, "You don't know you're giving your life." And I had a 34-year priesthood where I was well known and fairly accomplished, to come to a place where I didn't know a soul, didn't have a priest classmate, didn't know the territory. You come in pretty defenseless. In that moment, I said yes, and then prayed a lot for the next month until the public announcement was made. That phone call always comes out of left field. You never really quite expect it. But I will tell you this, Archbishop Sambi was talking to me about the next Sunday's gospel, and he said, "It is time for someone to take you by the belt and take you where you would rather not go." And that was the reading for the 2 days from that day. So yeah, I've had that experience. By the grace of God, I hope it's worked out. So I was ordained right here. Archbishop Beekline was the ordaining bishop, and Bishop Higgy and Bishop Tom Doran were also co-ordaining bishops. So we had like 36 bishops here and a full church, beautiful music. It was quite the day. Because I had tears in my eyes for so much of it, I have not yet looked at the recording, the video of that day, because I don't think I could stand it.
Bishop Doherty has worked to lead his people with the heart of a shepherd and the zeal of an apostle.
I think so much of what we're all about is rooted in prayer, and each person learns in a different way. And I still think there's some wisdom in saying that you learn how to pray by praying, to stop and be quiet. One of the things in the culture we're in today is that silence is such a premium. It's very difficult to be quiet even for 5 or 10 minutes. Then people mistake the quiet for loneliness, and they don't have a word for solitude. So there's another thing, teach the difference between solitude and loneliness. I think we'd be a lot better off. That's another thing that Christ can offer to people. When he went away to be alone, he was never really alone. Christ's still relevant for us. And I'll just tell you why Christ is relevant for me. It's a reflection of my theological training, my prayer life. You gain your humanity by your study of Christ and by your keeping company with him. We become more human by the time we're spending with Christ. In so many ways, in terms of understanding the value of our own life, the power that we might have in terms of the good or the healing we might do for others.